So this is very interesting because we have here in the War Scroll, the War Rule, but it's called the War Scroll really. We talked about the battle flags, what's written on them, you know, who's to join the camps. These camps are supposed to be totally pure places. Why are they supposed to be totally pure? The Damascus Document, to a certain extent, is written as a rule of the camps. If we read the last column, you see that the camps, the wilderness camps, are to reunion every Pentecost. As to a certain extent, Christianity has the early church coming together at that time. You know the book of Acts, which a lot of you don't, but Acts 21, Paul is rushing to Jerusalem to get there in time for Pentecost. All community is meeting, and then they make him go into the temple. James is the leader at that point, which is why I consider James a parallel figure to the righteous teacher of the scrolls, and he sends him into the temple to show that he regularly keeps the law. Well, that's basically what is in the last column of the Damascus Document. Elsewhere in the book of Acts, James makes some judgments, which we always hear that the Mibaker is making in the Damascus Document, the overseer, or whatever you want to refer to him as, guardian, Ramesh calls him. He makes judgments all the time about different things, ordinances and entrance, recording judgments, and he's over all the camps, and he's basically a very big figure there. But in the Damascus Document, as you recall, we have the restoring or raising the fallen tent of David in the 6th column, and in Acts 15, that's what James talks about in his speech at the so-called Jerusalem conference, when he meets and decides if Paul's approach is to be acceptable. So these parallels are too many, too numerous to be just ignored as accidental. My other scholars don't pay any attention to them. They don't look at the internal data at all. They've got a whole preconception that does not allow them to look at the internal material. And if you read any book, you'll never hear any sense made out of the internal data. Nobody wrestles with it. Nobody tries to make sense out of it. And that's because you can't make any sense out of it, given the archaeological interpretations that they've come up with, and the paleographical, and now the so-called carbon testing parameters. They defeat any chance to make any sense out of the internal data. The carbon testing is not even worth considering. I have a new article on that, redating the radiocarbon dating. You can get it on the Google it up on the internet if you want. I and 2 other guys wrote that article, and there's no way that the carbon dating is precise enough to get to any of the conclusions that they're talking about. Plus some of the same groups that did the carbon dating as worked on the shroud carbon dating, and that is a totally, hardly credible. I want to use the word incredible. So hardly credible. You only have the paleography, which is, we talked about before. That's really what they're making their assumptions on, and that is very flimsy sort of evidence when you range it against internal data of the kind we're talking about. Make a straight way in the wilderness, raising the fallen tent of David, and we're going to see a lot more. Holy Spirit baptism, bathing in lakes and streams and rivers, immersion, star prophecy, 3 different contexts in the scrolls. The internal data is totally against their reconstruction. Let's look at this. So the interesting thing in column 7 here of the War Scroll: no boy or woman shall enter the camps. Here's the camps again. From the time they leave Jerusalem. Now look, this is not just some crazy person, although they are maybe crazy, writing this just for his own amusement. The person writing this really believes it. He may not be a very good military strategist, but the person believes it. It's not a child's exercise book or some imaginary document. From the time they march out until they return, no man who is lame, blind, crippled, or afflicted with a bodily blemish, or smitten with bodily impurity. None of these shall go to war with them. Why? These were all classes, accepted Bill or not, of what they consider to be impure people. Impurity, according to the law of purity. Now, no one's saying this is kind, but they had their taboos back in the Mosaic, 10th century BC period, which is the law that they're dealing with. And, all priesthood in ancient times, the Persian priesthood, the Hindu Indian priesthood had extremely strict purity regulations. The Jews were supposed to be a priestly people. That was their conception of themselves. And so if these holy warriors are involved in a holy war of something like Islam, they want total purity in their camps. But even more than that, what's the reason for the total purity in the camps?
The law.
No, more than that.
Well, isn't it, you're going to have God's angels fighting your battles for you?
They can't, I don't know where they got this idea, like we make lots of assumptions. They felt the angels couldn't abide human impurity.
I wondered about if there's any connection with the whole battle, with the whole Gideon story.
They picked up a lot of those materials from the, anything that was relevant, but I don't know about the Gideon story as such, a few people defeating the many. It's a good thing to think about, but they don't mention Gideon, so I can't say about that.
1 Corinthians 11, isn't there a situation where Paul says for women to wear their head thing, lest the angels see them or something?
Something like that, but even more so, Paul says cut your hair at some point, rather than be like these crazy fanatics. He knows that they're not cutting their hair. And he says all kinds of things that are against these people, but that's another course. We're going to have to save that because we really have to study that very closely in order to bring those materials to bear. We got enough to cover tonight without getting too far afield. So let me just say that the point is that no man shall go down with them into the holy earth who is impure, and because of also sexual impurity, had a wet dream the night before, you're out of it, man. Women, of course, brought about impurity in many ways. You have to bathe. That's all the bathing is about. We're not saying that they're right or wrong. It's just their ideology, and they accepted this. And at another point, it says because the holy angels are in our camps. Not this particular section, but another section says it. And the Damascus Document says it a couple of times. So that's the purities, because the holy angels. And so, but I can't examine people's preconceptions. Why did they think that the holy angels couldn't abide human impurity? I can't go into their psyche, but this was just an assumption. If you believe in angels, you have certain assumptions about them, obviously. And since I have to fess up, I don't believe in angels. Wish I could. I wish there were. I'm not against them. I'm all for them. But I've never seen one. I don't know anyone else who has. And the person who has, usually we send them over to the psychiatrist. I'm told. So you start talking about seeing angels, they're going to put you into one of these holding pens. They believe these things, and therefore, as part of that belief, they believe they couldn't abide human impurity.
I think it might have something to do with First Enoch and the angels falling with.
All that stuff is possible. They had Enoch in among the materials, but I think it's pretty consistent ideology here. Let's get on to the stuff here that we need here. Look, they don't want to approach the slain here because in column 9, because they would be profaning their priesthood with this impurity. And I don't know if Ramesh is the right translation. I haven't checked him up here. Look, they got the names of the angels. It's probably one of the first places that all the angels are mentioned. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Sariel. There's no other biblical book except Daniel that has any of the angel names. These are very late materials, Enoch and stuff maybe. So the Old Testament books earlier don't have this. So then in column 10, they shall strengthen by the power of God, and they shall be fortified of the mighty warriors. And then this prayer, mighty works and wonders. You accomplish mighty works and wonders, oh God. Notice in the New Testament, there are mighty works and wonders too. But always it's Hellenized. At one point Jesus is made to say, oh, horizon and Bateside, if the, or something like if the mighty works and wonders that were done here were done inside in Tyre or something, they would long ago have believed. Always picking on the poor Jews and beating up on them in all the parables and sayings. And I don't think that a messianic leader in Palestine who wanted to be a popular one would have been able to talk like that. I'm sure it's all Hellenized, written by Greco-Roman redactors. And I don't know what the Messiah in Palestine said. But in any case, the mighty works and wonders in the Gospels are what? Curings, healings, resurrections, none of which I think people like myself, I don't know about you, credit any more than we do angels, unfortunately. I'm not saying the Gospels are worse or better than these materials. These people have angels. They have curings, raisings, different things, taking herds of swine and putting evil spirits in them and running them, walking on waters. None of this is Palestinian. This is Palestinian. The only miracle here are the angels and the mighty battles God fights on behalf of his people. That rest is Greco-Hellenistic. You can shoot me if you like, but if someone had told me this when I was 22, I would have appreciated it, because it took me about 15 years to figure it out. And I got a lot of gray hairs doing it. So it's about, people should fess up and be straight about it, and not play along with these kinds of things so that everyone is confused for half their life. I don't think it's fair, and it can hurt and ruin a lot of people's lives, particularly people who want to get a hold on reality and figure out what is true about the universe and what can help them, save them if you like, and stuff like that. I don't think that living in the internet age of the atomic and electronic revolutions that we're all living in, that we can go according to myths of the 1st and 2nd century BC, where people didn't even know if the earth was round or not, and no sense of science, no sense of astronomy, no sense of anything. And we're living in a kind of black hole, mystery there. Everything was dark, full of mysterious forces. Didn't know anything about medicine, nothing about modern medicine, didn't know anything about biology, bacteriology. They didn't know anything. And so all this was secret mysteries and frightening hobgoblins. And unfortunately, it's a very beautiful literature that we've inherited. I'm not against it. But it should be understood for what it is. It's not Palestinian. That material is nothing to do with Palestine. You won't find it in the scrolls. You won't find it in any of the other books except the Maccabees 2, which was a bit crazy. But Maccabees 2 basically only had angels appearing, beating people and doing things like that. But it didn't have exorcising spirits and curings too much. One type of thing where they let the governor live at some point. The martyrs there do die in Maccabees 2. All of them die. 7 brothers are flailed and everything else. Okay, so here are the mighty wonders in the scrolls. So I do think the New Testament is picking up off the scrolls and just putting it in the terms that a Mediterranean universe could understand. A Romanized, a Greckified, Hellenized Mediterranean universe that we've inherited and we are the heirs to. Look, no one's going to be the heirs to this. Why? Because no one's going to follow the law the way these people are intent on following it. So these people are losers to begin with. Paul figured that out. He knew that he couldn't propagate these kinds of ideas in a large-scale way, because of the impediment of the law and circumcision for people who were not circumcised when they were little kids, 8 days old. No one who's 34 or 44 is going to want to get circumcised without anesthesia. You're not going to just take a drink of wine and hope that it works. So these guys had no way of proselytizing in a wide-scale manner. Now, crazy enough, Islam did it. Islam does do it. Islam has picked up a lot of these things. The guy just called me in my office. He said, I was out in Afghanistan. I was in U.S. Army intelligence. Everything that you're saying in the James book is what I was seeing in Afghanistan. And he's right. He's right. That world is still possessed of these kind of ideas, this kind of extremism, this kind of fanaticism. And that's why I say the Palestinian thing is, God, did she put that on somewhere else? Did she? Ooh, my God, this is crazy, huh? We shouldn't have encouraged her to go into another room, I think. Can someone go next door and just tell them to turn it down a little bit? Oh. Such a bunch of cowards.
It's an education, like a teaching credential sort of,
They were trying an experiment in how much noise, musical rubbish noise people can make. It must be a speech class. Is that a major, really? Don't quote me. Yeah. Okay. So, the mighty works are thine. Thou hast chosen for thyself from all the lands the people of the holy ones of the covenant, instructed in law, so, and have seen the angels of holiness, and so on, and the dominion of the holy ones. This is a kind of prayer. And of the shape of Adam, and the confusion of tongues, and so on. The battle is thine. Thou dost deliver Goliath, the mighty warrior, into the hands of David. These are the mighty wonders, you see. The servant, because in place of his sword and in place of his spear, he put his trust in thy great name. We hear the great name at the end of the Damascus Document, column 11. Many times by thy great name did he triumph over the Philistines. Many times you delivered us by the hands of our kings to thy loving kindness, grace if you want. In accordance with our works, by which we have done evil, we have sinned, and by works we have sinned. And I don't like Vermesh's translations, but I'm stuck with it because I haven't done my own. And or according to our rebellious works or whatever. Battle is thine, not ours. Our strength, our power are accomplished. We don't accomplish any mighty works except by thy power. So everything comes from God. And these are the mighty works and wonders. And you hast taught us from ancient times, and then it's the star prophecy. We've had the star prophecy in the Damascus Document. The star prophecy is in the, I think it's in the Florilegium or the Testimonia. Now it's here. And right at the crescendo, you see, just when the battle. So now we're talking about this star that will rise of Jacob, a scepter to rule the world. He shall smite the temples and destroy the children of Seth. That's in the Damascus Document. Destroy the children of Seth. He shall rule out of Jacob. They believe this material. I mean, I'm not a believer really in this, but these people are, completely obsessed with this. So then it says, by the hand of your Messiah. It does not say anointed, okay? And he has no right to put anointed to deceive people that they're not talking about the Messiah. Because they think, oh, anointed, well, that's not the Messiah, is it? Yes, it is. And it says the Messiah. Put a big M on it, and it'll read totally differently. So they're now talking about this prophecy in terms of messianism. This person reveals things too, and that you may glorify yourself by your enemies by leveling the horde of Belial, not Satan. The word is Belial. He never speaks about Satan in any text. Mastema sometimes, M-A-S-T-E-M-A. Wherever Ramesh has Satan, it's Belial.
He updated it.
B-E-L-I-A-L what?
He updated it.
Oh, he's finally done that? I guess we've been criticizing him, so he's finally, you know. But look, by the hand of the poor, whom you have redeemed, you will do to them as you did to Pharaoh and the captains of his chariot in the Red Sea. God is going to fight for them with his own angels. And what they're going to do is like what they did in Pharaoh's time. I mean, these people are not really very realistic. They don't understand what Rome is about. You know, and they're going to get crushed, aren't they? You know, it's too bad. It's sort of like Bin Laden doesn't know what America's about either. And, you know, he's a little cleverer than these people because he knows how to run and hide. He's got a much bigger army than these people have because there's about 1 billion Muslims in the world. So these people are like a small little kernel of total purists. But listen, that will kindle the poor in spirit. Downcast is, look, poor in spirit. Hear it on the Sermon on the Mount. And in John the Baptist in Matthew, they shall be like a flaming torch in the straw. He speaks about how he's going to be like a flaming torch in the straw. Forget how he expresses it. John the Baptist's field sermon, as Eisenman calls it. To consume ungodliness and not cease till iniquity is destroyed. This is the final war against all evil on the earth. And you see, thou hast foretold all this. And they quote, like the New Testament does, Isaiah 31:8. Instead of what the New Testament quotes, they quote Isaiah 31:8. Assyria shall fall, these are all codes, by the sword of no man. By the sword of no mere man, no mere Adam. No mere Adam, it says, not no mere man. By the sword of no mere Adam, he will be devoured. Yes, we're talking about a supernatural sort of human being here who is going to be involved in this. You are talking about a Jesus type, if you want to call it that, but a much more warlike, more like evangelicals consider the return of the Messiah to be, you know, he's going to destroy all evil on the earth, isn't he? And, you know, and the no mere man, I only discovered that recently, the no mere man, because I looked at the Hebrew, and it isn't man, it's no mere Adam. And the primal Adam ideology among the Ebionites, the group that follows James, the Judeo-Christians as so-called, who are the James followers, the poor, Ebion meaning poor. You see, the poor are mentioned here. That's why you often have to, you will deliver by the hands of the poor. And that really is Ebion. What does Ebion mean? It's an Ebionite document. It's the hands of the poor that are going to do this. The enemies of all the lands, to humble the mighty of the people. This is the Seleucid Empire we're talking about? I don't think so. The Seleucid Empire is a drop in the bucket, isn't it? It's nothing. This is Rome. This is the Roman Empire they're going to humble. They're not going to do it, although Christianity has in effect done it in its own way, differently. By the hand of those downtrodden or bent in the dust. Here we have the Damascus Document. To pay the wicked their reward and justify thy true judgments. Justify the righteous and condemn the wicked, said the Damascus Document. That's what the sons of Zadok do. In the midst of the sons of men, to make for thyself an everlasting name. And then you fight with them from heaven, column 12. And now we get this picture of the heavenly host coming on the clouds of heaven. That's always spoken about in the New Testament. If you've taken my Christian Origins class, you'll know that that's the proclamation James makes in the temple when he's thrown down and taken out, and the Herodian Roman establishment have him stoned, but the people are for him. In the presentation of, it's in the church fathers, it's in a father by the name of Hegesippus, who lived closest to these times, whose work unfortunately hasn't survived, but
Eusebius in the third, this is the 2nd century. Eusebius in the 4th century has pilfered him, and at least has given us that testimony about James's death.
He was originally, it seems, an Ebionite from Palestine, Eusebius. And it's in Eusebius, the history of the early church, the history of the church, rather. Ecclesiastical history, as it's called. So James is also making this proclamation in the temple of the heavenly host coming on the clouds of heaven, and here it is right here. It's more detailed. Not just as Jesus is made to say it a couple of times in Scripture, you will see the Son of Man standing on the right hand of heaven, and the heavenly host coming on the clouds of glory, or something like that. Well, that's what we have here. The multitude of the holy ones. The heavenly host is in heaven, and the hosts of his angels, and in the holy abode, praising your name. It's just a more detailed picture. This is what that's compressed from. And thou hast established thyself the elect of your holy people. The names of all their hosts are with thee in thy holiness, and thou hast recorded for them in the engraving tool of life the favors and blessings, that thou mayest reign forever and throughout all eternal ages. Thou wilt muster the hosts of thine elect, and their thousands and myriads, and thy holy ones and thine angels, that they may be mighty in battle, and smite the rebels on the earth with thy great judgments. This group reveling in the coming judgment? Oh yeah. These are retiring peaceniks here. You ever hear any peaceniks speak like this? These people are waiting for a final apocalyptic last judgment, but they're going to help. They're the ones who are going to help with the judging of the sons of Zadok and so on. And that they may be mighty in battle and smite the rebels, that they may triumph together with the elect of heaven. You are in your holy temple, your kingdom, and the congregation of your holy ones is among us. There it is. Another, for everlasting help. We despise kings. You see, how are we going to get suicide bombers in Iraq? We despise kings. We mock and scorn the mighty. For the Lord is holy, and the King of glories, the 24th Psalm, if you know it, is with us. Together with your holy ones, valiant warriors, the angelic host, there it is, are among our numbered men. Our numbered men. I don't know if Ramesh has a good translation here. I'd have to, redo it to be sure. But it's good enough. And the hero of war is with our congregation. The host of his spirits are our foot soldiers and horsemen. And here's the cloud imagery. They are as clouds of rain, covering the earth, as a mighty shower of rain, shedding judgment on all that grows on earth. So it's like heavenly rain. That's what's coming. The heavenly host on the cloud. It's all rain imagery and judgment imagery. And all this is cloud imagery that's compressed in the New Testament. That's my position. And I think it makes a lot of sense, frankly. Just because the New Testament is compressing it doesn't mean that it's not the same thing. This is what they're talking about, I believe. Smite the nations, and of course, now Christianity as we know it is much more benevolent and mild, accommodating. This is the extremist thing, but that only gets that way as it goes overseas. Out of Palestine, because it can't function. The Romans, you see, are going to round all these people up and kill them all, just like we're doing in Afghanistan and Iraq. But the ones that are going to be left are going to be more accommodating people. Now, some of this stuff leaked out into Islam. Muhammad got a hold of some of this stuff 5 or 6 centuries later, because probably a lot of these groups went down into the Arabian Peninsula. Muslims themselves don't even know that they're connected to this material. They don't want to hear about anything before Muhammad. But, there's even statements that you have in the Quran in this literature. Now, I don't think this literature is exactly like Islam. I'm just saying that if you want to know about holy war, that really means it. Just look at Islam. And you have a very good picture of that. The king shall serve you, rejoice. But it's Zionistic too. Again, not like the New Testament in the sense that evangelical Christianity understands this, but most people dealing with the New Testament don't realize the Zionism of this movement. Look, Zion, rejoice greatly, Jerusalem. Show thyself. Rejoice, the cities of Judah. Keep your gates open that the hosts of the nations may be brought in. There is a kind of Gentile mission there, by the way, that I've never noticed before. The hosts of the nations may come into this thing, but they're going to have to come in, you know, in a more legalistic way than the Pauline mission is going to bring them in. And we have, as I've already told you, in the Damascus document, the Nilvim are the joiners, and the Nilvim are somewhat like what you would call God-fearers at the end of that document, which usually apply to groups associating themselves with the synagogue around the Asia, Greece, and the Middle East generally. The kings will serve you and bow down before you. Shout for joy, daughters of my people. Is this a nationalist group? For sure. Is this group going to apply the messianic prophecy to the destroyer of Jerusalem? Could you imagine such a thing of this literature? And yet that's what Rabbinic Judaism does. That's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the so-called founder of the Talmud of Rabbinic Judaism, the kind of Judaism we know today, he supposedly had an arrow shot into Vespasian's camp after he was smuggled out of Jerusalem in a coffin. It's in the Talmud about 3 different places. And then he said Rabbi Yochanan is one of the emperor's friends, he had in his message, and he was supposedly ushered in before Vespasian. Of course, the story is bogus because Vespasian wasn't even in Palestine at the time. He'd already gone back to Rome in 68 to take oath the emperorship after the assassination of Nero, and his son was there, abetted by certain Jewish turncoats, like Tiberius Alexander, the nephew of Philo from Alexandria, and the Herodian family generally, and people like Josephus, Bernice, who you have in Josephus, Drusilla, and others, all involved with the Romans. Agrippa II sharing the slaves that they took in Galilee when they came down in Galilee first and took all the cities of Galilee and made the Sea of Galilee run with blood. They weren't walking on the Sea of Galilee, they were bleeding in it. And this Titus and everyone conquered all the cities on the shore of the lake. And then he and Agrippa II divided up the inhabitants after killing the old men and the children and the babies, and sold them all to slavery. They could make money off this deal. And they took all kinds of prisoners, Agrippa II and Titus, and then they would have games that they would play to celebrate their birthdays and to celebrate Domitian, their brother's birthday, to celebrate their father's birthday with games all along the coast of Lebanon after Jerusalem fell. They sold huge amounts of people into slavery for what Christians call martyrdom activities. All these people were killed in the ring, or women were taken and sold into whatever kind of situation they were sold into. So it was a tremendous disaster. So the rabbis wanted to salvage something. So Rabbi Yochanan, was presented as being the emperor's friend. And he then proclaims, like Josephus did, which I think is accurate. I think Josephus really did this in Galilee in 68 or so on, when he didn't commit suicide with the others, but he and a friend killed the others and then surrendered, and then proclaimed Vespasian the world ruler would come out of Palestine. So they knew this literature. And they took the world ruler prophecy and applied it to the Roman general coming out of Palestine to rule the Roman Empire, Vespasian. So can you imagine this group doing that? Never. Paul? Yes. Josephus? Yes. Rabbi Yochanan? Yes. All these people have one thing in common. They all claim to be Pharisees. So I define Pharisees, seekers after smooth things, as we'll see in the Nahum commentary, as seeking accommodation with foreign power. Not on small little nitpicking things. They're all nitpickers as far as legal things go. Big things. Foreign appointment of high priest. Foreign rule in Palestine. Niece marriage. That's what Qumran is objecting to. Polygamy. Divorce. Kings marrying non-Jewish women. All those things are in the Temple Scroll, Damascus Document, and so on. It's a very nationalistic group. So when I read my colleagues' work, and I see them talk about things they talk about, and don't even understand the nationalism of this group, If you read DeVoe or his assistant Millet or Cross, I mean, these people sound erudite, but they're not even coming to grips with this material. I mean, you just have to read it for 5 minutes to know the nationalism of this group, the passionate nationalism and Zionism, among other things. So, anyway, so I don't think Paul is a passionate nationalist, but I think the others were. The Essenes were. I think James' group are Essenes, basically. So these are all very complicated things, and it's very tough to sort them out if you're living with the myths of of what you've been taught in various religions, rabbinic or Judaism or different Christian presentations. This is just a new literature that's really amazing that it should have survived. All right, so we have some more light and darkness in 13 and 14th, Wrath of the Idols, more about the poor of the way and the perfect of the way, and the revenge, the day of the vengeance of the sword of God in 15. You can read all of that, more about the day of vengeance. None of this is very peaceful. Day of vengeance, all through 15. The God of Israel, 16, has called out the sword against all the nations. The question is to decide who the Kittim are, and no one has agreed on that point. Michael, the archangel, who was the guardian angel of Israel, is talked about in 17. He's fighting the Prince of Darkness. And finally 19. What's repeated in 19? Same as column 12. Just repeat it again, look at it. Our King is holy, and the King of glory is with us. That's from Psalm 24. And King of glory, who is the King of glory? The Lord of hosts, says Psalm 24. How many know that psalm? He is the King of glory. And when I was a kid, we used to say psalms in class. I'm really grateful that we did. I think they should have not have stopped doing that, because at least people got some training in religion, good, bad, or indifferent, in in their daily life. Those were beautiful things, the psalms. Nobody could object to the beauty of them. And I used to think that they kept on saying, "Who is the King of glory? And he shall come in," and so on in this Psalm 24. And finally they said, "The Lord of hosts, he is the King of glory." I thought it meant the fellow who invited guests to his house. I didn't realize it meant the Lord of armies. I now understand it better. It took me about 40 years to figure that one out. So, okay. Look at this. The King of glory is with us. The hosts of his spirits are our foot soldiers and horsemen. They are as clouds of rain coming over the earth, as a shower of rain, shedding righteousness on all that grows. And so on and so forth. So we have the total repeat of the previous material. And then, of course, "O Zion, rejoice greatly," etc., etc., etc. So you can see the apocalyptic nationalism of this document. And it's messianism too. It's a pretty wild document. You can read it yourselves and draw your further conclusions. Let's quick go on now to material I need to cover before the end of this class. First of all, the Nahum commentary. Let's look at that quickly. I think I don't know where you'll find it, but my book's falling apart here, and I've got some notes, so I wrote notes in this book, but let me see if I can find it here. You have a more detailed one. Let me go back to the newer Ramesh here. He was able to. He should give us some of his royalties. We did such a. He couldn't. He didn't have the ability to print this big volume earlier. But because we freed the scrolls, then he was able to include all that material in it without fear. And instead of thanking us, he just heaps abuse on us for it. That's what I call gratitude. We've made him huge amounts of money. And he doesn't even have the graciousness to at least give the thanks. First part has got some storms, whirlwinds, a bit fragmented. So something about Lebanon, sons of Zadok. It's not very much except some storms. Let me see if I can find. Okay, I'm going to go back to let's see. he's got this as column 1 now. Before it was in column 2. He says, behold the nations, where is it now? I've got the wrong one. Let's see. Where was I? Mine has skipped over here. Oh, there it is. Okay, so we're going to Roman numeral 1. That's where I pick up with this, what he had printed previously. But where is the lion's den and the cave of lions there? It's Nahum 2:11, if you look at it. This concerns something to do with the ungodly of the nations. Who I submit to you have to do with Herodians, not Maccabees. Now the question here is going to be, is this the Maccabean period or is it the Herodian period? That's what you did all your previous work to try to determine. Wherever the lion goes, there's the lion's cubs. And this is the key thing for people trying to date this. This concerns Demetrius, clearly Demetrius, king of Greece. Well, he's not king of Greece. He's the king of the Seleucids, who sought to enter Jerusalem on the counsel of those who seek smooth things. Now we know that the Pharisees were born around this time. We did it earlier. And that they were the people who were collaborating with the foreigners to bring them into the country against the Maccabees. And then the people turned and supported Alexander Onias at that time. This is about 100 BC or so. Now, that doesn't mean that this is being written in 100 BC. That's what the people who originally took this material assumed. Oh, because it's talking about 100 BC, it must be written then. No, no. They identify people in the past, like we did. Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Ulysses Grant, Woodrow Wilson. They're not afraid to talk about them. It's the present that they're afraid of. They don't identify people in the present. So this is as ancient history to them as it may be to us. In any case, they know their history as well as people like Josephus does, or Paul, or anyone else like that. But God did not permit the city to be delivered into the hands of the kings of Greece. Okay, the Seleucids. We'll agree with that, right? From the time of Antiochus, that's Antiochus Epiphanes in the Maccabean books. All this is overt now, right? Until the coming of the rulers of the Kittim. The Kittim come after the rulers of the Greeks. And it's just so obvious. And you'd have to be blind not to be able to see it. I could teach this to kindergarten people. And yet you read in book after book after book, the Kittim are the Seleucids. No, they're not the Seleucids. They come after the Seleucids. What can I do? All I can do is stand on my head and repeat the same thing over and over and over again, but it doesn't do any good. You can't teach the whole world. And you'll read book after book after book, I assure you, with the same sort of, because they can't get a job if they don't echo what the others are saying. No one will hire them. That's the problem. They have to get recommendations from big name professors. They have to study with big name professors. All of them have adopted the establishment viewpoint. So they're not going to hire these people, at UC Berkeley or UCLA or any of these places because they go and ask Harvard who they should hire. And that's why you only find people like us in places like Cal State. That's why Cal State's reputation is increasing, not decreasing. Because you get very, what's it, when you get thinking that's very in the box thinking at these other institutions, because people are afraid to get out on a limb at these places. We don't care here. We'll say anything here because, nobody's listening to us, first of all. But second of all, they do listen to me now. But second of all, we don't have people looking over our shoulders. This is a democratic people's university. Anyway, that's my interpretation of why it's possible in these places. Anyway, but then she shall be trampled under their feet. Okay, something about the Nahum, the lion tearing its cubs. This concerns the furious young lion who strikes by means of his great man and by means of men of his counsel, chokes his prey for a lion, etc. The Pesher, the interpretation of the same word, concerns the furious young lion. who took revenge on those who seek smooth things, and hung men up alive, a thing not formerly done in Israel. Now, Paul is very interested in that, hanging up men alive in Galatians, and he uses it to say Jesus took the man hanged alive is a cursed thing. And therefore, Jesus took the curse, our curse, upon himself, and therefore we are saved by him because the curse of the law is now off our back. Because Paul knows, that's Galatians 3:3, that he's been cursed, like they cursed at the Dead Sea Scrolls because he's strayed to the right or the left from the law. So his retort is, okay, crucified person is a hanged man, it's not exactly hanged alive and so on. But you see the difference in the Old Testament verse he picks, an obscure verse from Leviticus or something on that particular subject, is what they say is that you should not hang the person you executed up past nightfall, because then you will pollute. They already assume the person has been executed and the dead body's been hung up, like the Americans in Fallujah. But here the scrolls are very careful. They add the word alive here. That's an attack on crucifixion, because they don't say it's a curse to be hung up alive. They say it's never done in Israel previously to hang up alive anybody, and they don't approve of it, and they are against it. Behold, I am against you, saith the Lord. He's against crucifixion. It's not that the crucified person is cursed, according to the scrolls, as you see. This is an extremely important passage. It's extremely important. It's capable of multiple interpretations, obviously, but I submit to you, we don't have exactly the Pauline thing here by any means, but we do have one thing that's against the Pauline position. There's no curse involved here on the person hung up. The curse is on the people who hang him up. Just as the Damascus Document said, you shall not swear a person to death by the laws of the Gentiles. Anyone who does so will himself be executed. I mean, this is really important stuff, overlooked by almost everybody. You see it in the materials. I'm not lying to you. It's there. So it's clear, whatever you make of this, that this group is not so much worried about a cursed man on a cross, or being hung up, or the cross may not be what they're talking about. In Alexander Ananias' case, he hung people up on stakes, remember, or something like that. Who did he hang up? Alexander Ananias. Pharisees. And then when the Salome Alexandra came back after he died, then her people were dominated by the Pharisees, and they took vengeance against all of the Alexandrianites people. So what this document is not against Alexandrianias as such. It's against the fact that he hung people up alive. Doesn't approve that. So whatever Mel Gibson might say in his movies, if they think the Jews of this period approved of crucifixion, they are out of their minds. Because the Jews were the ones mostly being crucified, literally in the hundreds of thousands by the end of the war. If you read the end of the war, you'll know the Romans took everyone up and crucified them in Jerusalem. Josephus went around looking for friends to take them down, because he was important enough that he could get some people reprieved. The scarlet material that's been circulated worldwide over 2,000 years is so shocking. And it's so sad that I don't know what to, there's nothing I can say or do about it except to point these passages out to you. Okay, and notice after that here. So, because of man hanged alive, I am against you, etc. The priests of Jerusalem have amassed wealth. This, I think, of the Herodian priests, who we know were rich. The next thing is, column 2 is his messengers. That's apostles in English. Messengers is one way of translating it. Apostles is another way. They shall be heard among the nations. Apostles are going to be sent out among the nations. Woe to the city of blood, it's full of lies and rapine. This is the city of Ephraim, those who seek smooth things in the last days and walk in lying and falsehood. We're in the last days, not the period of Alexander and Ananias. This is past history, but it has to do with the Pharisees. Now, they don't like the Pharisees, you see, even though they don't approve of his having crucified some, or not crucified, hung him up alive, if you will. So they're not against the furious young lion, except on that point. They're against the people he hangs up, but they're just and righteous, and they don't believe that that's proper, and they think it's a thing never done before in Israel. See, we're now in, but it's talking about it because we are now in the dominion of those who seek smooth things. Column 2 here. And the dominion of those who seek smooth things is the Herodian period, because it's the Herodians, as we've just found out, who are in league with the Pharisees. Herod promoted the chief men of the Pharisees and killed all the people of the previous Sanhedrin, except 2 Pharisees, if you recall, Polio and Sameas, whom he never stopped putting favors on. These look like 2 of the Pharisees in Talmudic literature. Talmud is the heir to the Pharisee position. The New Testament notice is against the Pharisees. Messianic groups were against the Pharisees, but Paul was not against the Pharisees. Paul claims that he was a Pharisee. So I think Pauline Christianity is Pharisaized Christianity. Christianity wanting to get along with foreigners, recognize the Roman emperor in this world, pay your tax to Rome, says Paul in Romans. That's what the Pharisees believed too. That's what Rabbi Yochanan believed. Seek accommodation with foreigners. But these groups, these extremist groups, these Messianic groups, these Essene groups, these scroll groups, they were against this policy. And they didn't like the dominion of those who seek smooth things. So to me, the seekers after smooth things are both the Jewish Pharisees and the Pauline Christians. And I'm not sure if we can distinguish between them. They're all together because they're all claimed to be Pharisees. And they're Pharisee in that they seek accommodation with foreign power and recognize the might of Rome. I think you'll admit this group does not recognize the might of Rome. Certainly doesn't recognize the Seleucids, but it's not worried about them. Anyway, this huge amount of corpses and a huge amount of slain because of their guilty counsel. Now, this is about Ephraim, leading Ephraim astray. Some people led Ephraim astray with their lying tongue. The letter of James attacks the lying tongue. And it's like a Pauline adversary. It's in chapter 3 of the letter of James. And lying. Everyone perishes by their counsel. The tongue, as James says, is a wicked world all to itself. In the letter of James, if you know it. It's chapter 3. So I don't know how to do all this, but I think Ephraim are Pauline Christians. I may be wrong. The reason is that they, the word that they will abandon those, column 3, when the glory of Judah shall arise, I think the Messiah, the simple of Ephraim, which is like the little ones in the Gospels who don't know about the law and things like that. Ephraim is the northern kingdom originally. They separated from Judah. Shall flee their assembly, that is the assembly of the Pharisees and those who teach Pharisee-like things, and shall abandon those who lead them astray, and shall join Israel, nilvim, it says, and shall once more the word in Hebrew is nilvu, they shall join. In the Damascus document, we already found that the joiners were with them. And I said to you, I thought that was a group of Gentiles who had come into the community as attached joiners. In the letter of Esther, nilvim, and in Isaiah 2, both of them, nilvim, N-I-L-V-I-M. In the Damascus document, it's a play on Levites. Nilvim means Gentiles who join the Jewish community or attach themselves to the Jewish community. That's what it means. And that's what I think Ephraim has to do with it. That they have been deceived and that they will once more join Israel. Join the community proper. It's all code and it's past the Seleucid period. How far into the Herodian period, you'll have to decide. I think it's quite far into the Herodian period. Because of all the bodies and everything. It could even be after the fall of Jerusalem. We don't know when the scrolls were put in the caves. We only know they weren't put in the caves any later than the Bar Kokhba period. When is the Bar Kokhba period? 132 to 136. Now, the normative theory said that 68 was the last date, but we discussed that before. That was based on imprecise coin data and improper reading of the archaeology. It may have been 68, but that didn't mean that they may have destroyed the buildings in 68. I don't think that they did. They may have burned, the buildings were burned somewhere around then in the Qumran community. But these people didn't live in the buildings. Those were only communal buildings. They lived in caves, lean-tos, tents, things. They didn't go anywhere. It's like the Americans taking Fallujah, as I told you before, and then trying to, follow those people when they flee Fallujah. They just come back. You got to have a huge army to go after these people. That's poor Marines. Had 280 dead down in Camp Pendleton. That's really sad. I'm not against the war, but I feel that's high price. Not that we don't have to pay it, but I think we could have fought it better, more professional. I think Saddam Hussein planned all this out, just because that's why he didn't put up a fight. He wanted to suck us in and then do what he's doing from Syria. Lately, found that most of this is being conducted from command posts in Syria. America always fights the last war. They'll get a hold of it, but a lot of poor people are going to suffer in the process. Okay. Now, I've got to hurry. The Habakkuk comes. Very important. We'll go through it quickly if we can. I've got that in my book, so I can go back to my book. Aside from the Damascus Document, it's the most important Dead Sea Scroll. Okay. This is the vision the prophet Habakkuk saw. How long, O Lord, shall I cry out for help? This is in the time of the Babylonian invasion. Its interpretation concerns the beginning of the last, probably, generation. I cry out violence, and you do not deliver me. All quotes from Habakkuk. Robbery, violence. It's Pesher, it's interpretation. That's why it's called Pesher, because that's the Hebrew word for interpretation. Concerns those who rebel against God with treachery. They rob riches. We've heard about robbing riches. I don't think the Maccabees robbed riches, but not like the Herodians and the Herodian priesthood and the Romans. So this robbing riches has to do with these people calling themselves the poor. Torah falls into disuse, not just the law, the Torah specifically, the precise part of the law. The interpretations, they rejected the Torah of God. Ramesh others put law of God, but it literally says Torah, which is the first 5 books of Moses, as you may know. That's why Paul is so angry about Moses. He doesn't like Moses in 1 Corinthians or in Galatians. He calls the covenant on Sinai the covenant of slavery in Galatians 4. He calls it the covenant of Hagar, because Hagar, he knows, was an Egyptian. So he says the covenant of Sinai is an Egyptian covenant. He just says whatever he wants. No one ever calls him a task, because before the 19th century and the separation of church and state, we burned the stake for calling him a task. Even people like Joan of Arc got burned. So say, why did people discover this in the past? There was no way after the 3rd century for anyone to speak without getting burned for 1,000 years, at least. Okay, I mean, even people like Galileo were just, frightened out of their wits. And all he did was say the earth went around the sun. Poor guy. That was house arrest for 10 years till he died, just to avoid being burned. Giordano Bruno was burned. Savonarola was burned. Joan of Arc was burned. Head of the Templars were all burned. Imagine burning people. This is insanity. Total insanity. So no wonder people are frightened. Anyway, they rejected the Torah of God. Something about the wicked encompassing the righteous in line 10. Well, whenever you see the wicked and the righteous, it always has to do with the wicked priest and the righteous teacher. That much we already can figure out about the scrolls. The interpretation, they look for words. Wherever you see lying, it's the liar. Wherever you see the wicked, it's the wicked priest. Wherever you see the righteous, it's the righteous teacher. And they purposely pick out texts with these kinds of usages. Righteous, wicked, kittim. All, they knew what the code was, and they looked for biblical texts, which Habakkuk and Psalm 37 are full of. Psalm 37 and Habakkuk overlap each other. Any case, clearly the interpretation is the wicked priest, the righteous is the righteous teacher. That's the end of column 1. It's a bit fragmented. The reason that the first columns of all these things are normally more fragmented than the last is that when you rolled them, the last columns went inside and the first columns were outside. So since these were scrolls, the outside stuff got more damage than the inside stuff. The temple scroll is in terrible condition except for the inner, temple scroll is about 60 columns, one of the longest scrolls. And the last 30 or 40 columns are pretty good. The first 30 columns are pretty bad. Okay, column 2. This is really important. Now it's pretty well preserved from this point on. The interpretation has to do with the traitors. We know about traitors in the New Testament. Judas Iscariot is the traitor. Here are the traitors. Together with the man of lying. They did not believe what the righteous teacher expounded from the mouth of God. Well, that means they're in the scriptural exegesis sessions of the righteous teacher. That means they are internal adversaries in the movement itself. How do they know what the righteous teacher expounded from the mouth of God? And it also concerns the traitors to the laws of God, as we had the traitors in the Damascus Document to the new covenant in the land of Damascus, who turned back and betrayed the fountain of living waters there. These are all parallel documents. Therefore, they're probably all written around the same time. Since they did not believe in the covenant of God and defiled his holy name, likewise the interpretation concerns the traitors to the last days. Not sure we have the exact translation, some of it is a little bit broken. These are the violent ones and the covenant breakers who do not believe what they heard was going to happen in the last generation from the mouth of the priest. Now, the priest and the righteous teacher in this column are the same person, because both of them are expounding the prophecies of God. And the priest in Hebrew is normally the term for the high priest. So the righteous teacher, according to this group, if you're going to go that way, and I think Psalm 37 says the same kind of thing, is also the high priest for this group. So we have a kind of opposition high priesthood. They don't recognize clearly the regular high priesthood, the Herodian high priesthood. They've set their own high priesthood up. That's who the sons of Zadok are. And the righteous teacher doubles because of Zadok and Zedek and righteousness and so on, and the way they play with words. He doubles as the high priest. And in his heart, God put the discernment or intelligence to interpret all the words of his servants, the prophets. So what the righteous teacher, doubling as high priest of this group, does is he has the knowledge to interpret Scripture in an authoritative way. He's a big shot. And I consider him to be closest to James in early Christianity than any other character. Now, if you can find a better character to identify with, John the Baptist perhaps, fine, but John the Baptist was not head of a community the way James was. And James is, someone who was also said, the early Christian texts say he wore the breastplate of the high priest, that he went into the Holy of Holies and pronounced the forbidden name of God. He had a chance to go into the Holy of Holies. Only the high priest did that once a year on Yom Kippur. So he's functioning as an opposition high priest in early Christian literature, yeah.
So how would he manage that if he's not the establishment?
Because I think at some point the temple fell into the hands of the extremists. Read Josephus. The 50s, they're fighting like mad to control the temple. At one point they get control of it. They build a wall to block the Herodians' view of it. I think James is killed in the wake of the temple wall affair. You read Josephus real carefully. In the 50s and 60s, things are deteriorating rapidly. By the time the war comes, they burn all the high priest houses. They kill all the high priests. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity. Even Jesus is portrayed in the New Testament as cleansing the temple, taking over the temple for a time, not letting anyone come back and forth in the temple. Whether that's accurate or not, I don't know. But the point is that there's plenty in Josephus to show the extremists took control of the temple for certain periods. Doesn't mean they had total control, because the others could always call the Roman army. But they were fighting for control of the temple. Anyway, let's go on here. Anyway, if you've got a better person, I don't think it's anything to do with the Maccabees. I can't see anything to do with Maccabees here at all. I don't know what these people are talking about. Who talk about the Maccabees? Who are the teachers? What have the Maccabees done wrong? Maccabees are fighting among each other, perhaps. But anyway, let's get on. So, I got to get through this. God put the intelligence, discernment to interpret all the words of his servants, the prophets, through whom God foretold all that was coming to his people. When we get to the righteous shall live by his faith, one of the foundation pieces of Christianity as we know it, Pauline Christianity, Habakkuk 2:4, that's what this is building towards. Habakkuk 2:4 is a foundation piece of Christianity as we know it. Paul builds in Galatians and Romans on Habakkuk 2:4 to say that that faith in the righteous one saves you. In other words, Abraham, he says, was saved by his faith, he claims. He uses Genesis 15:6, and Abraham's faith was counted to him as righteousness. He combines that with Habakkuk 2:4, the righteous shall live by his faith, and then he finally gives Isaiah 53:11, the suffering servant, to saying the righteous one will justify many. Puts all those three together and gets his conception of Jesus Christ. That's the tripartite scriptural foundation of Christianity. I'll give it to you again. Genesis 15:6, Habakkuk 2:4, and Isaiah 53:11. And what he does is he says that you are made righteous by Jesus, the righteous one. So through faith in Jesus, this is counted for you as making you righteous. That's all very convoluted, but it's all in Romans and Galatians, how he plays with those things. Yeah.
There's Genesis, Habakkuk, and what else? What was the third one?
Isaiah 53:11, very famous suffering servant. The whole portrait of Jesus is based on that. But anyway, let's go on here. This is going to lead up to Habakkuk 2:4. Now, the very fact that Habakkuk 2:4 is an important prophecy to these people should tip you off that we're in the Pauline period. Now, James also was interested in that, in Genesis 15:6, that Abraham was justified, as Paul puts it, by his faith. But then James says, don't you know, you foolish man, that Abraham was also justified by his works? So he's attacking a person of the Pauline persuasion. That's in James 2. And he says, that's how we're justified, made righteous, justified, made faith and works working together. So we're all dealing with the same concepts here. But let's wait till we get to Habakkuk 2:4 here. Okay, in any case. So, let's see, where are we? I think I've lost my place here. Okay. God foretold all that was coming to his people, line 10 of column 2. And that's going to be picked up when we interpret Habakkuk 2:4. Let me just run through the Ketimar here, and then we'll take a break. For behold, I will raise up the Chaldeans, a cruel and aggressive nation. That's in Habakkuk. That's, of course, the Babylonian period, 500 years before. Its interpretation concerns the Kittim. Now we're going to see, are these Kittim the Seleucids or the Romans? Look, this is not in Habakkuk, this is in the interpretation. They are swift and strong in war. The Seleucids? They couldn't even beat the Maccabees. Causing many to perish by the sword, and the whole world to fall under their dominion. The Seleucids govern the whole world. The Kittim, something more about them, who march to the ends of the earth to take possession of the populated places. Interpreted, they march across the land, smiting and plundering the cities of the earth. The Seleucids. And for this is what is meant, taking possession of the populated places which are not their own. They are frightening and terrible. Their judgment and majesty proceed from themselves. Interpreted, this concerns the Kittim, the fear and dread of whom is upon all the nations. Fear of the Seleucids. Maybe Alexander the Great. So it's either Alexander the Great or the Romans. Nobody in between like this. I don't think it's Alexander the Great, so it's the Roman. What can we do? You want to put carbon testing or paleography such as it is against that? This is internal data. It speaks huge amounts. And their counsel, all their evil plotting is planned in advance, their senate. They deal with all people with cunning and deceit. Their horses are swifter than leopards and move swift than wolves. Their horsemen ride and hurl themselves afar. They swoop down like an eagle, anxious to eat. Oh, of course, the Roman symbol is the eagle, but that doesn't say anything because this is the Babylonian stuff from Habakkuk. All come to do violence, and the breath of their faces is like the east wind. This concerns the Kittim. Here's the now their view. They trample the earth with their horses and pack animals. They come from afar, from the islands of the sea. Wow, the Mediterranean. Maybe the Greeks originally came from there, but they're not coming from there now in Syria. The Romans do, to consume all peoples. They eat all peoples, like an insatiable eagle. They speak to all peoples with anger, ill will, fury, livid faces, for that's what's meant by the breath of their faces like the east wind. They scoff at kings and ridicule leaders. This interpretation that they jeer at the mighty and sneer at honorable men, they deride kings and ministers, they make light of large armies. I just can't, I don't know what to tell you people. They laugh at fortified cities, they batter down earthquakes. And this concerns the leaders of the Kittim, who despise the fortresses of the peoples. I think that's important, column 4. The Herodian fortresses were, I consider the peoples to be the Herodians, the kings of the peoples. And that's a code for the Herodians, because they don't consider them Jews. And their fortresses were these fortresses like Masada, like Machaerus, where John the Baptist is executed. They had these Maccabean fortresses that they built up into really big strongholds, but the Romans didn't even pay attention to them. They laughed at them contemptuously. With a mighty host, they encircle and capture them, and through terror and fear, they surrender them into their hands. They destroy them because of the sins of the inhabitants. There's the sins of the inhabitants, like in the New Testament. Our sins be on us and our children. You know, it's because of our sins this is happening. The wind shifts. Its interpretation concerns the leaders of the Kittim, who in their guilty council house, the Senate probably, passed one man following the others. A lot of people think that's 68 AD because that's after Nero was killed. A whole bunch of new generals came one after the other in succession until Vespasian finally took over. You can read Roman history. In any case, their leaders come from Mark Antony's time down to the present, one after the other to despoil the earth. No, this is the Romans. More about the peoples, column 5. Its interpretation of the passage that God will not destroy his people by the hand of the nations. Now we're getting more hopeful. But by the hand of his elect, we heard that the sons of Zadok are the elect of Israel who will stand in the last days and justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. That was in the Damascus Document. Now we hear that by the hands of his elect, God will execute judgment on the nations. So it's sort of like St. Peter in Christianity, executing judgment on the people who go to heaven. So it's just a little different, but it's not too different. The sons of Zadok, the elect of his people, will execute judgment on the nations, and they will punish the evil ones of its own people, too, not just the foreigners. Evil ones, therefore, usually refers to the Jews, evil Jews, who are cooperating with foreign power and keep his commandments only when convenient. They only keep the commandments when they suits them. They too will be punished. Anyway, here, Staro traitors remain silent. This concerns the house of Absalom. Absalom rebelled against David. I don't know what else that might mean. But in any case, they were in the community, and there's a code for people within the community itself who were silent at the time of someone chastised, verbally or otherwise, the righteous teacher, and did not come to his aid against the man of lying, who rejected the law in the midst of their whole assembly. Now, assembly in Greek, as I've told you, can mean church. It can mean congregation, as most people translate it, but the word is assembly, and it can mean congregation, it can mean church, depending on how you want to do it. So there was a confrontation between the righteous teacher and the liar within the community, and the Absalom party did not support the righteous teacher. Let's go back now to column 6, and I'll take us up to 7, then we'll have a break. Interpretation concerns the evil ones of the Kittim, who collect riches with all their booty, like fish in the sea. Watch this imagery here, because this is the sort of crowning trump. The prophecy is Habakkuk 1:14, 16. All of them take up with a fish hook, catching them in a net. And you know all the fishing imagery in the New Testament, and the fishermen, and going to the Sea of Galilee, and taking a fish out, and getting a tax coin in its mouth. If you've read the New Testament, you're familiar with all that imagery. It's probably a spin-off from this. This is why he sacrifices to his net. This is why he celebrates, burns incense to his dragnet, since his portion is fat and his eating is plenteous. Let's look at the interpretation. The Kittim catch riches and booty like the fish of the sea. Of course, the apostles in the New Testament are catching fish in nets all the time. As for what was said about sacrificing to his net and burning incense to his dragnet, its interpretation is that they sacrifice to their standards and worship their weapons of war. Since it's because of them his portion is fat, his eating is plenteous. Its interpretation is they parcel out their yoke and their taxes, eating or consuming, devouring all the peoples year by year, giving many countries over to the sword. These people like the Kittim? They hate them. They hate them, yeah.
I don't know if you consider this a parallel, but...
Now I'm going to get to that one. Worshipping the standards?
What's that?
Worshipping the standards?
Well, yeah, the fish catching the riches, and
Yeah.
the coin from the...
Oh, absolutely. Oh, I do. I think all that's all that. But I just don't have time to go into it all because of our time constraints tonight. I apologize. I wish we had more time for that. But you're right, that's a problem. Absolutely. But look here. This is the key point here. It's the Romans who who sacrificed to their standards and worship their weapons of war. Because the emperor's bust was on the standards, and the emperor had been deified in imperial Rome. This is in imperial Rome. This is not Republican Rome. Could be Mars was on it maybe then. But by this time the emperor's bust was on the standards. Augustus onwards. And at the end of the storming of Jerusalem, when they burned the city and the temple, Josephus says the Roman legionnaires and the smoke and the fire and everything made a sacrifice to their standards and adored their weapons of war. Now, I don't want to be cruel, but what do our genius scholars say about this one? Oh, well, yes, this is probably the Romans, but you see, it couldn't be 70 AD because Qumran fell in 68, and Josephus says they did this in 70 AD. What? I mean, this is the argument. They think that this has to be taken as referring to the sacrifice they did in the temple in 70 when the temple fell. No, this is just a habitual practice. The Romans would have sacrificed to their standards all the way down through Galilee, 67, 68 and onwards. Every town that they took, they would have then deified, they would have adored their standards and made their sacrifices and then marched on. This is not a specific sacrifice. This is just what they do. This is what the Kittim do. This is the final, complete tip-off that we're dealing with the Romans, and we're dealing, in fact, with Imperial Rome. We're in the 1st century. And in fact, I think this is an actual eyewitness account of the fall of the temple in 70 AD. Or right before, written by people who knew everything was falling to pieces around them and knew that what was happening was horrific destruction. But crazy enough, in the midst of all this, they're not really interested so much in the Romans. They're more interested in their internal disputes with the liar and the wicked priest, whom they actually hate because the wicked priest seems to have destroyed the righteous teacher. Now, we got to figure out who that is. In my book, I say it's Ananus, the high priest who destroyed James. I could say it's Jesus, but I think that's a stretch. And so on. But if you have I always say to my opponents, if you have a better person who suggests, let's hear it, let's hear your arguments. The point is that it's easy not to take a stand. That's the safest position in the world, not to take a stand at home. That's what most of these scholars do. They don't identify anyone, so nobody can criticize them. But we know enough about this period to have to force people to toe the line and make identifications. Okay, if you don't think this is the person that I say it is, let's hear who you say it is, and they don't have a person. They say the wicked priest is Alexander Onias, or the wicked priest is John Hyrcanus, or the wicked priest is, it's a whole bevy of people among the Maccabees before the Romans come. After the Romans, they don't have any idea. Okay, look at this though. They parcel out their yoke. That's what the Romans did among the kings of the East. Jesus eats with tax collectors and sinners. You see, just the opposite of this. This condemns tax collectors and sinners. The sinners are the Jewish backsliders. The tax collectors are the people who are collecting taxes for the Romans. The Herodians were the Roman tax collectors in Palestine. That's what they did. They parceled out as a kind of tax farming into the kingdoms of the East, their kingdoms, as long as they paid the revenues to Rome and kept some for themselves, as any tax farmer does. And that's what you have here. So they parceled out their yoke and their taxes in the east among the kings of the peoples. East of Greece, that's what they did with these petty kingdoms, the Herodians and others in Armenia, Asia Minor and elsewhere. Now listen to this. Its interpretation concerns, therefore the sword is always unsheathed, to decimate the nations mercilessly. Its interpretation concerns the Kittim, who destroy many by the sword, young men, grown-ups, old people, women and children, and have no pity even on the fruit of the womb. Well, that's exactly the description Josephus gives of what the Romans did in the Sea of Galilee when they came down and conquered the cities there where the people resisted. They slaughtered everybody and had no pity upon women, children, or even the fruit of the womb. That's another thing that tells you where we are and what period we're in. Now, let's stop there and have a little break. And I'm trying to get through this. I just look at Psalm 37, and then I'll tell you about the exam, okay? Sorry to rush. Apologize, but I'm trying to get it all done as best we can here.